to get off on a bad note here, but we were just informed about Mr. John Lear from you that unfortunately passed away last night, and I know he played a critical role in your career, George. Yeah, so I'm sorry about that. If there's anything you want to say about him, feel free.
Well, John was a complicated man. He was a great man in many respects. He was the son of a legend in aviation. You know, Bill Lear developed the Lear jet, also the 8-track tape, by the way. In the early days, if you look back into the files, Sean, I know you dig into a lot of old document stuff. There are clear indications Bill Lear was involved in anti-gravity research. Because of all of his accomplishments in aviation, young John, got to meet all these legends and develop relationships with them. And he, in some ways, was kind of the black sheep of the Lear family, but he carved his own path. At the age of 18, he becomes an aviator himself. He flies everything. He had more than a dozen world speed records. He crashed at a young age, too. Terrible injuries that stayed with him the rest of his life. He worked for CIA. He flew for the CIA in Vietnam and then other hot spots as a cargo pilot around the world. And he was my entry point to the UFO story. He came into the news station one day in 1989 and plopped a big pile of documents on the desk of my mentor, Ned Day, our managing editor, the best reporter in Las Vegas ever, and said, "Hey, Ned, he had helped Ned break a big story, the existence of a plane that was invisible to radar out at a place called Area 51. So he had certain credibility with Ned, and he showed him this pile of documents, UFO documents. You got to look at this as the biggest story ever. It'll be the crowning achievement of your career." And Ned looked at some of the stuff. He said, "This can't be real. If it was real, I'd already know about it." So he shoved it aside. I was eavesdropping, as always. And I said, "Let me take a look at that stuff." And I read this material, and I thought, well, this is kind of intriguing. And at the time, I hosted this little radio TV show, 30-minute interview program called On the Record that aired in the mornings, Saturday or Sunday morning at 7 o'clock. Nobody watched it. I'd have the city council or something like that on there. And I had Lear on, and the response was huge. I just let him go. I had never heard all this UFO stuff before. Just let him go. And he unleashed this torrent of information that I had never heard the likes of before. And the phone starts ringing, and people are wondering, is that the real deal? What's going on? And I start reading a little bit about UFOs, and then they had him back again. The response was bigger. Had him on a third time, and he hinted that this would have been late 1988. He hinted that he knew a guy who'd just been hired out at Area 51, and there's going to be some revelations about flying saucers. And the guy he was referencing was Bob Lazar. And it was, in fact, it's to the day, March 29th, 1989, last night, same night that John Lear died. Lazar, Gene Huff, a couple other people were out in the desert at Papoose Lake with a camera and a telescope, and they caught video of an object, glowing object that rose over the mountains of Papoose Lake, not Groom Lake, glowing, made some maneuvers, then went back down. That was Lazar had said that's when they're gonna fly that night, and sure enough it did. So Lear was an interesting guy, went into a lot of conspiracy theories that you had to take with a grain of salt, but I owe him a debt because he really did help me so much in the beginning, got me interested in it, and for good or for better or worse, he really was helpful.
Thanks for sharing that story. I mean, I think a lot of us, me especially, being somewhat new here, there's a lot of history to this topic that, I'm somewhat ignorant to. So being able to learn that, and also realizing that there is so much more to people than is pretty important, especially like John Lear. Like, I think maybe people think about the moon bases or something like that, but, he was a real person that contributed a lot to this topic, for the simple fact that you're here today, and that's played a huge role in OSAP and as Senator Reid and Bob Bigelow. I mean, who knows if one of those pieces were missing. So
it's true. Yeah. True.